Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Science at Melbourne Public Lecture. My name is Professor Moira O'Brien, and I have the privilege of being the Dean of Science here at the University of Melbourne. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet upon today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the lands and First Nations people from the people who are joining us online. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are Australia's first scientists with deep and enduring knowledge of the land and the waters and skies. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I welcome all First Nations people joining us here tonight. The annual Science at Melbourne Dean's Lecture Series shares the faculty's knowledge, application and love of science with the wider audience. Tonight's lecture, entitled Model Citizens, How Mathematicians Are Helping the Planet, is our third for this year, and I hope you join us later in the year for our final public lecture series to learn more about our research discoveries, innovations and impacts. We love talking about what we do. We love responding to your questions, and we are greatly appreciative of your support of the actions we can all take for a better world. This lecture is being recorded and will be available online shortly on the Faculty of Science website. We'll also email the link to everyone who registered, so feel free to share it. And for those who are in the room, please feel free to join us afterwards for drinks and nibbles and to continue the conversation. Tonight's lecture is also a key part of the University of Melbourne's annual Science Festival, which is part of National Science Week. The festival showcases the latest in STEM research across the university's faculties, schools, institutes and centres. And this year we celebrate our 10th anniversary of the Science Festival, making it a little bit extra special. And if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to visit the University's Science Festival website and explore the program. There's a QR code that is about to appear. Thank you. If you scan that, it'll take you straight to the website and you can look at the many activities that we have going, and they are suitable for everyone from ages 10 and up. For example, on Thursday between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m, you can return here to Science Gallery to experience the Collaborate to Innovate Expo, which is back by popular demand. At this free expo, you can meet some of our brilliant researchers, students and industry partners and explore hands-on displays of innovative work that is helping to shape the future. I also encourage you to join our free mid-afternoon masterclasses hosted online daily until Friday. These are 45-minute interactive presentations where you can meet the researchers investigating tuberculosis, superbugs, sneezing chickens, a giant coconut cracking rat, history-making weather and enhanced beer and wine. I hope you take full advantage of these free events. So to do so, as I said, please click on the website and register for your attendance. Meanwhile, tonight we are introducing you to some academics who are a bit like Clark Kent or Diana Prince, the mild-mannered alter egos of Superman and Wonder Woman. Like Clark and Diana, you'll generally find these people working quietly indoors. They often pass unnoticed, but that's how they like it. And like Superman and Wonder Woman, the experts in tonight's panel can do things that most people can't. These people may appear outwardly like the rest of us, but they share a hidden superpower called an aptitude for advanced mathematics. I'm not sure how they acquired this power, but I wish I had it. And they refuse to confirm or deny, are they descended from a god or an alien race? Perhaps they were exposed to a radioactive protractor during an early geometry class. Who knows? One way or another, they became the extraordinary mathematicians and statisticians you see before you. And fortunately, like comic book superheroes, our panellists have chosen to use their powers for good. They dedicate their working days to helping people and our planet. These model citizens are using the power of numbers, big data and new mathematical models to help nurture all life on Earth. Our moderator will introduce these mathematicians, superheroes, in greater detail, so I will now focus on him. As a young boy, Graham Phillips spent way too much time in the chemistry lab he built under a table in the back of his parents' garage. After acquiring a PhD in astrophysics and working in various science jobs, he switched professions to become a science journalist, commentator and TV presenter. Indeed, you may remember Graham as a reporter on ABC's TV Quantum and as host of Catalyst. He also presented Channel 7's Beyond Tomorrow. He's written for most Australian newspapers and has had several popular science books published. Graham currently spends half of his time as an academic here at the University of Melbourne, providing lectures and training in science communication. And with great apologies to Gilbert and Sullivan, I feel compelled to say that he is the very model of a model panel moderator. So, with anticipation of a fascinating discussion, I hand over to Graham.
Thank you very much, Moira. That was a tongue twister at the end there. And look, I have to make it clear, I didn't have a meth lab or anything under my table at the back of the garage. It was just, standard kind of experiments. But that was my sort of start in science. I was sort of right into the chemistry. But I ended up in maths myself, actually, and did my PhD in applied mathematics. And one of the questions I've been asked throughout my life is, maths, really? You can do something useful with maths? And also, I tutored high school kids to put myself through uni, and the same sort of question, why do I have to do this stuff? How is it ever going to be important in any way possible? And I would keep saying to them, just hang in there. It gets really important and really interesting. So I think that's one of the things we should discuss as well tonight, is whether maths has kind of a bit of an image problem, because it really is a very useful discipline. And as our superheroes here will tell us, when they bust out into their outfits, I'm guessing, I'm intrigued to see what you've got. We'll find out a little about what they do. So look, let me introduce them first before we go any further. So on my immediate right there, I have Professor Jennifer Flegg, who's a Professor in Applied Mathematics and an ARC Future Fellow in the School of Mathematics and Statistics here at the University of Melbourne. Her research focuses on using maths and stats to answer questions in biology and medicine. In particular, she develops mathematical models in areas such as wound healing, tumour growth and infectious disease epidemiology. And we've got a fun fact about Jen. She once flew a plane when she was 7 years old. Yikes, I'm keen to hear more about that. Next person along, we have Associate Professor Guoqi Qian, who is a statistician and an applied mathematician here at the university. His research is driven by real-world problems such as forecasting landslides, forecasting tropical cyclones, and modelling precipitation. He's also involved in genetic studies. And, fun fact for him, is he loves walking upstairs, apparently. Every weekend, he's ascended and descended the 1,000 steps in the Dandenongs. Finally, at the end, we have Dr. Doug Brumley, who's a senior lecturer in applied mathematics here at the university. His research group uses maths and lab experiments to answer questions in biology. Doug's research covers a range of topics, including marine symbioses, biomedical flows, and microbial interactions with plants. And a fun fact about Doug, he has run 8 marathons, really, and enjoys solving large Rubik's Cubes. I'm not sure which of those is the most terrifying, but anyway, could you please give them all a warm welcome? Okay, Jen, look, you're immediately on my right, so let's start with you. So tell me about how you use maths to model drug resistance, right, in malaria.
That's right. So I use statistical models to look at how trends are changing in space and time to see where certain drugs are appropriate to use to prevent malaria and where they can't be used. So these are quite data-heavy models. They require lots of field work and lots of collaboration with experimentalists, and they're quite computationally heavy, so they require lots of computer coding and hard computer work.
So run me through. I sort of haven't taken anti-malarials for a while. You have tablets, right? Is that right? And they're becoming resistant, the mosquitoes, to those drugs.
That's right. So when you expose the parasite to a drug, there's always a chance that resistance will emerge just randomly, stochastically. And if you let that evolve over time, it will eventually take hold, and then that drug will no longer be useful against malaria.
Okay, so you can sort of predict where it shouldn't be used.
Exactly.
In fact, I have a slide of yours here. I'll get you to talk me through that. In fact, an animation. I think if I push the button there, things will change.
That's right. So this is an animation. So on the top, you can see the year changing from 1990 through each year. And this is showing where resistance is predicted to be high. That's in the very high yellow colour, versus where resistance is predicted to be low in the dark blue colour. And the white circles are where there's observations that have been collected by field studies. So what you can see is that where resistance is really high in East Africa, this drug can no longer be used to treat malaria, but it's still safe to use over in West Africa.
Okay, and can you make predictions about the future from that map? Can you project where things are going?
You can. As you project forward in time, your predictions will become more uncertain because you're less certain about the future than you are about the present because there'll be no data.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah. All right, well, and speaking of prediction, let's ask a question to you, Guoqi. You're looking at making weather predictions of some kind 1 year in advance.
Yes, yeah. So,
Tell us about, I know it's all secret, you can't tell us your particular algorithm of how you do that, but just run us through what are the issues around, you're trying to predict rainfall patterns, is that right?
right.
And so tell us what are the issues around that?
So first, among all of this forecasting of climate variables or features, rainfall forecasting is actually the most difficult. So normally these days, what we can see from daily news, we have weather forecasting. It will tell you whether there will be a rain tomorrow, Tuesday or Wednesday, and so on. So at the moment, when you see the news, they will provide 1 week ahead, but often it's very hard to go beyond that. And the other one is when they provide the rainfall, they don't really predict the amount of rainfall. They don't tell you exactly how many millimeters will be there tomorrow. They often tell you there is a chance. There is a chance of shower up to 5 millimeters. This chance is 50% or 60%. So they are always associated that with this we call that a risk assessment, and don't provide an individual value, but just a range of values. So the more challenging problem, of course, people are interested in longer term forecasting, okay, not just the next week. Of course, for ordinary people, they may be sufficient, but say for rocket scientists, okay, they may be interested in forecasting the rainfall for the next 10 days or next 1 month. That will be fine. But say for agriculture or insurance companies, or for people who want to construct a renewable energy infrastructure like wind farms, they're possibly more interested in how much rainfall or how much the precipitation would look like in a 1 year term of 1 year term of basis.
So could I get this right? So with the issue with predicting rainfall is you need data, right?
Yeah.
So, and is it the case that a lot of the rain gauges are sort of in cities or population centres, and yet you're going to predict rainfall right over the continent, and we have satellite data for rainfall, and is your algorithm to do with combining that data in some way?
Exactly, yeah. So you see, this is about rainfall forecasting. It's definitely depends on data, so you need data. But now let's look at what data we have, because we are not just forecast the precipitation for one location. Okay, we are forecasting precipitation for a big area like Australia, continent scale. But then what we have in Australia, we have rain gauge. But rain gauges are not distributed evenly. So in middle Australia, there's no rain range. So this is a problem, because if you don't have a complete data, you are not able to provide accurate forecasting. But on the other hand, now we have satellites. So we have satellite. We have all different satellites. In our case, we have access to lower national oceanography and also atmospheric agency in USA. We also have satellite access to JAXA satellite. So satellite can provide precipitation estimates everywhere, very evenly distributed. But the problem is the satellite estimates are not accurate. They are not a direct observation, they are derivations. So before you are able to do the forecasting eventually, you first have to combine all of this data. So you have to borrow the strengths and discard the drawbacks of each source of data set. So that's the way where statistics can be very useful. So we develop. So we first model that, then we develop algorithms, then we do that.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very interesting. I suspect there's a lot of money in that ultimately, which is why you're not telling us the algorithm, right? Doug, so you use maths in a very different environment, right? An underwater environment. The Great Barrier Reef, for example, coral reefs. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's right. So my group actually focuses on the fluid mechanics of microorganisms, and wherever you see a range of different life forms, we're often accustomed to thinking about the ocean in this large, crystal clear water environment, or the groundwater in soils, for example. But if you zoom into the microscale, you'll actually see that it's a really intricate, patchy environment. So the water at the scale of microorganisms is not transparent and clear and uniform, but rather a real kind of heterogeneous jungle. And so while we think of the marine food web as consisting of fish and krill and whales and so on, there's increasing importance to understand the behavior of individual microorganisms. So if you zoom all the way down under a microscope to look at individual bacteria and algae, you'll see that the way they move, the way they behave, the way they swim has a tremendous influence on the amount of food that they can attain, and therefore how much that they can grow, and they kind of build the base of the food web in this manner. And so my group focuses on a range of problems. Here we've shown an image for coral reefs, and you can see on the scale of sort of tens of meters, to which we might be most accustomed. If you zoom in, the top photograph in the middle there is on the scale of a few centimeters, and there the fluid still looks quite transparent. But if you go down even smaller, looking at the microscope, you'll see bacteria, you'll see algae, all sorts of things moving around in a really complicated manner. So my group uses microscopy. I've shown an image of our microscope here. We put little pieces of coral and other organisms under the microscope, and we look at it through the microscope. We take movies and we see how they actually move. This informs the mathematical models that we actually develop, and so we can simulate their movement and use these models which are grounded in kind of experimental truths to make predictions. Now the important aspect of this work is that then the models actually allow us to go back and search for things that we didn't see because they make predictions. So we have this sort of feedback loop between the modeling and the experiments, and we go round and round in kind of a feedback loop there until we have a really good understanding of the dynamics.
And have you discovered anything, particular that you could tell us about in that process?
Yeah, so we have discovered that the small, or with collaborators, it's an emerging field that these corals actually generate very strong feeding currents. So there were some really landmark papers in the last decade that showed that the little cilia on the surface of corals actually generate these very strong feeding flows. And so the image on the bottom right shows the movement of microscopic tracer particles around the coral. So it's anything but stationary. And it turns out that these little cilia are exactly the same hair-like appendages that are in your airway to help sweep out dust. So it's a really highly conserved structure, one of the most conserved structures in biology actually, that is performing similar roles in humans and in corals. And so the mathematical modeling enables us really to abstract far beyond the scale of this particular organism and start to develop models that can be applicable to a range of different systems.
Fascinating. I mean, we've got three very practical examples here of how mathematics is being used to save the world, if you like. How do we get the message out to people? Why do you think it is that people think, oh, maths, that's something useless. How could that help save the world? I mean, Jen, you go first. What's going on there, do you think?
I think most people's exposure to maths is at primary school and high school, and then they probably stop there and don't continue on to university with more maths study. And unfortunately, the maths that you learn at primary school and high school is a little bit dry, a little bit boring, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all really liked that structure, but I don't think that learning structure would work for a lot of students. It's very rule-based and repetitive. I think it can be seen as a bit boring. It would be great to sort of see some more practical examples make their way into high school classrooms.
Yeah. Guoqi, have you got an idea of how we could make maths more attractive to school kids, letting them know that it's got this wonderful future that they could be part of?
Yeah, I have some personal experience. So like before COVID, we have open day every year in our university. So we will have some high school students coming. So I often give them a question to ask. I said that, okay, suppose this prevalence rate of a disease in the population, say, is 1%, 1 in 100 people. But now the medical test, will only be 95% accurate. So now there is a guy who comes to test positive. Now what is the chance? What is the probability that this guy does have the disease? So I give this very provocative question to the people who come in. I think very often they say, oh, there must be 95% because the test is 95% accurate. So if I got positive test, then I have a 95% of a chance to get this disease. But then I ask him that, are you really sure of that? I can tell you the answer. The answer is only 1.9%. Rather than,
so that's enough to get them intrigued.
To trigger them so they will ask why. Then I can show them. Okay, so
it's sort of making it relevant to them.
That's true.
Do it. And Doug, I know there's a push in Western Australia, I think, from a physicist there who wants to teach Einstein's relativity to high school kids, because he has the same thing with physics. He said, they just learn this sort of boring stuff. And it's really cool when you get to university, but it's not so cool at high school. So that's what he's kind of pushing. Do you reckon there's some way we can push different parts of maths in high schools to make school kids realise, this is actually important and interesting?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there's an interplay between the actual underlying mathematics and the observables that you see. And so often we think about the mathematical models and the equations as actually being necessary to describe something, but you can also take inspiration from things around you that you see and translate into mathematics. So it doesn't have to be the study of the equations to actually sort of derive joy and insight from that. It can be the underlying mathematics can be observed in structures. So for example, the way we see these little cilia on the surface of coral actually beating together in synchrony is, at its heart, very similar to the way a row of metronomes will synchronize if they begin out of phase and they all start ticking together. So you might look at this as a biological system and actually see the underlying mathematics and the joy from that. I think another aspect to get people really interested in mathematics here too is to realize that it's not that we sit around solving equations all day, and that maths can be really useful for a broad range of things, from sampling data, answering questions like where should I measure, where should I put my rain gauges, how should I conduct my experiments? It's sort of an extreme case in which you're solving large differential equations and producing plots. But the mathematics is useful for a whole range of things, all the way up to that point. And we frequently work with biologists, physicists, and other collaborators who would like to have some mathematical insights into how to set up an experiment as well. What size it should be, how long should I record this movie for, what am I going to see there? So I think from a kind of consulting or informative point of view, maths is really useful language to engage in.
Yeah. All right, well, let's change tack a bit, Jen. You also look at wound healing, using mathematics for wound healing. That's not something you'd immediately put those two together. What do you do?
So what I do is think about so the type of wounds that I look at are wounds that don't heal. So they're wounds that are called chronic. So they either don't heal successfully or they take too long to heal. So they're very painful for the person that has them. They cost lots of money for the healthcare system. And so what I look at is different therapies that can be used to change the chronic wound into a healing wound. And so this might be, for example, a venous leg ulcer, which doesn't heal because there's problems with the pressure of the blood in the leg. You can put pressure bandages around the leg, which force the blood back to the heart. So I mathematically model that process to try and optimize the treatment.
Okay, so is that like a statistical thing, or what?
No,
You
that's
look at the flow of, you know?
yeah. So it's more like what Doug was saying before about its differential equation model. So it's looking at the pressure, fluid mechanics, those types of things, rather than statistical. That could be another approach, but it's more mechanistic modeling.
Yeah, okay. And have you had any successes there? Have you been able to sort of make some concrete suggestions?
We have, but I guess mathematics in a healthcare sense or in a biology sense isn't a tool for decision making by itself. So it supports other evidence. So I wouldn't want a mathematical model to be, you know, the decision making for like whether or not a treatment should be used. But it has corroborated and given insight into different treatments and has been used in clinical trials to support them.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, I'm hearing from all of you here that it's a lot of interdisciplinary work that goes on in maths, right? You're often working in a whole lot of different fields. Are there challenges there you've had to deal with? I mean, maybe I'll start with you, Jen. I mean, you both speak very different languages, I imagine.
Yeah, it's really challenging. I think the first time I gave a presentation to a non-scientific audience, to a biological audience, I pitched it completely wrong. I put equations in it and it didn't go down very well. It takes a very unique skill set to be able to explain something which is mathematically quite complicated to someone who's interested in what you're modelling but not interested at all in the equations. It's a challenge.
Yeah. What about you, Guoqi? Have you come up with some tricks to overcome that communication chasm?
Yes, I think we have a similar experience as Jen had, but we, in the case, for example, for this precipitation forecasting. So actually, this is not the question brought to us by a meteorologist from Bureau of Meteorology. The scientists there just said, okay, we know you are statisticians, so we have data coming from different sources. Can you do some like a data qualification or curating for us to get a good quality data? So then I asked, what data do you have? So this is a lot of trouble here, because something in my mind, I want this type of data, is actually not the data they're provided to us. So there's a need a lot of discussion and communication to finally find the common ground. So okay, this is the thing that I need. With something like this provided to us, we can provide something like more than what you ask for. So this is what do we do?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess there's sort of a sales process that must go on there to a degree, mustn't there? That
Yes.
you have to convince people who don't know much about maths that you've got these secrets that will help them in some way.
Yeah. So actually, in our school, we have a particular subject called statistical consulting. So there's a Professor Ian Gordon, who is the director of statistical consulting of Melbourne. He is teaching that subject. So this is really like a negotiation, a business negotiation between. So, but now we're negotiating statistics. So we are trying to use statistics to solve the problem. Maybe our customers or stakeholders may not realize how interesting they are, because they come up with they just say, okay, you can do a lot of calculation because you are a statistician, right? But yeah, we can do more than that.
Yeah. Well, I hope they negotiate a good price for your secret algorithm there. But Doug, what about you? Do you have experimentalists, theoreticians? It seems like there could be lots of conflicts in terms of not speaking each other's language there. How do you deal with that? Have you got your feet in both camps?
So my research group actually works in a range of different fields. And so we have people who are based in the School of Mathematics and Statistics. We have people in biosciences who conduct experiments and collaborators at the Melbourne University, elsewhere in Australia and abroad. And so we're quite accustomed to actually speaking to people in different fields and actually conveying the really important points to them. I found with the various collaborations that we've engaged in, and these range from mathematics, physics, engineering, microbiology, plant sciences, computer science, data science, really broad range of topics. and including within mathematics and statistics, because it's also very broad. The best way to really engage is to think about the research from the ground up. I think the kind of co-design of the research. One of the kind of latest stages a collaboration can form is when somebody has a model and somebody has data, and they come together and kind of hope that they agree with one another. And I think that sometimes provides ways to iterate a little bit and have a bit of feedback. But by far the most productive collaborations are the ones that engage over a kind of coffee to begin with. What are you interested in? What am I interested in? Kind of go from there and really co-design the research from the ground up. Of course, in mathematics, we have a technical language of equations, differential equations, and so on, but it's quite possible to actually convey what you do without any reference to equations. I think for people who like solving equations, it's very intuitive. You can see the structures and you can predict the results sometimes. But that also means that you can often speak in metaphors and find similes and other parallel systems that convey the same meaning. So for example, the metronomes. We don't need to think about elasto-hydrodynamic synchronization of cilia. We can think about a fun example with pendulums kind of ticking in sync and eventually locking into a rhythm. So I think that's really important, is finding examples that can engage with people that convey the same equations, but without having to write them down.
And is that a bit of an issue in terms that you're kind of oversimplifying it in a way? You've got to sort of target it to your audience. I think like an example I often give is, if you talk about what an atom's like and you say it's a bit like a miniature solar system. There's a big nucleus at the centre and that's like the sun, and going around that are these electrons, which are like planets going around the sun. But say that to a quantum physicist and they'll say, what do you want about it? We disproved that 100 years ago. That's completely wrong. You need to know about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And do you know what I mean?
Well,
is it tricky tailoring that simple message to the audience and still maintaining some sort of accuracy?
So I think that the different kind of applications are valid in different domains. So you talk about different kind of models in physics. They're all valid in different regimes and different limiting cases. So keeping track of the boundaries and the use of those particular models is really important. There's a nice analogy that I read a long time ago by James Guoqi, and I'm sure it's more widely used, that applied mathematics is like developing maps. It's kind of the art of cartography. So thinking about the key aspects of what you're trying to distill into a map that is useful. And I don't know about anyone else in the room, but if you drive with satellite view on Google Maps, it's very difficult. You want to map with the roads, the footpaths, and the exits. And that's all you really want when you're driving. So it's a matter of thinking about the right model for the right purpose that's suited to what you're doing there.
What about you, Jane? Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in and say, so there's a famous statistician, George Box, who said all models are wrong, but some are useful. So it depends what your research question is. If you have a research question or something you want to answer, that the mathematical or statistical model has to be tailored to answer that research question. If you then have a different research question, the same model may be useless. So I think you just have to be careful about what you're trying to answer and then making an appropriate mathematical model.
Yeah, and are there communication issues around getting the ideas that models are predicting across? I mean, I'm just thinking of climate change, for example, where there's been quite a lot of criticism of models. Have you got comments you want to add to that about how you could deal with that? I'll come to you first, Jen, and then Guoqi.
Yeah, I think another example that comes to mind would have been around COVID and what models were predicting around COVID. So a lot of predictions were made in the absence of intervention. So if we do absolutely nothing, this is what the disease will do. But then, of course, we weren't doing nothing. We were all staying home, wearing masks, doing protective things. So actually the model predictions were really wrong. And then people would turn around and say the models were really wrong. But that's just because they were calibrated in for a different setting. I think the same, can be applied to any situation. So for climate change, models have been calibrated given a certain initial condition, and we might be changing course over time.
Reminds me of an old adage when I was doing that kind of work. It's rubbish in, rubbish out, right? So it's all dependent upon the data that you put in. Guoqi, yeah.
Following Jan's just comments about that. So this is actually now, these days, the modeling is quite different from the old days the way. So we call that a data-driven model. So the model is actually, we are not going to choose a model from a dictionary of models. We form domain knowledge of this subject. We can identify a class of models. So this class of models still has a lot of unknowns, but maybe partially is of the known form. So these unknowns, we have to determine that. we have to determine from the data that we have. So this is called data-driven model. So that's why we have to have a very good quality of data. Then we can use the data to train the model class. So they call that model training. So then when the best model is finally trained from this process, we can use that best model to do whatever the analysis of forecasting or prediction. So an example is like voice recognition. So you see, so you have mobile phone, then you talk to your mobile phone, then the mobile phone will convert your speech into text. At the beginning, it's very bad, right? But after a few runs, it will be very good, because the mobile phone now has apps which has artificial intelligence there. So this artificial intelligence is going to train your voice into the text, and this artificial intelligence is actually a data-driven model.
Okay, that's the difference with a data-driven model. I mean, you raise a good topic here. Let's talk about it if you're comfortable. So, Doug, AI, is that going to make any impact at all on what you do? Artificial intelligence?
So a really big part of what we do is trawling through vast quantities of experimental data and trying to extract information that can be fed into our models. So our models might record things like the position of cells, how they're moving, their distribution. These are kind of digital quantities, like locations. But of course, we don't see ones and zeros with a microscope. We see photographs like the ones you see on your screen here. So what we need to do through recording movies of cells swimming, sometimes hundreds of thousands of frames, and actually it brings us to a question of generating too much data in some cases. It's very easy to generate 100 gigabytes of data in a few minutes, which is very difficult to then process. So actually choosing the right experiments to do quickly without wasting data on your hard drive is quite important. But then recognizing cells, tracking them, identifying them is very similar, and there's some really striking parallels, I think, with what Guoqi is saying in terms of speech recognition. We want to do microorganism recognition. When you look through the microscope and you see a whole bunch of bugs moving around, which ones are they? Are they pathogens? Are they other things? Are they algae? How do we pick this? And so at the moment we have developed a range of image processing techniques that we work on in the group to actually extract this data. But I think indeed there's a really bright future for using artificial intelligence, machine learning to automatically recognize and train computers to extract information from these experimental movies to feed into the models. And that's notwithstanding the actual use of these techniques in the modelling itself.
Yeah. Jen, do you see it making a big impact on the work you do?
Yeah, I think so. So just leading on from what Doug was saying, so you can use artificial intelligence to help design or create the mathematical model itself. So it uses lots of data to learn the mechanism that should be in the model. So you can think about how a disease spreads through a population, and you could write down a set of equations for what you think might happen. If you then have lots of data, you could actually verify that those are the right equations, those are the right terms to characterize that process. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how it gets uptaken by the community.
So are you saying that that artificial intelligence could almost find the equations?
Yeah, so people are using artificial intelligence to help find the equations, and sometimes they get it close, a little bit like AI in other ways, right? Like it's almost speech recognition, but it's like a little bit off. But if you know the system that you're looking at, you can interpret that. But yes, it can learn equations from modelling.
So when a mathematician's going to be out of a job, how many years have you got?
I don't know.
How many years have any of us got, I guess, is the question.
Sure, I think we still have heaps of job to do. we are not out of job. Yes, so artificial intelligence can help here, but I think it's more about you do need to set up this model class correctly. So I'll take an example. So we are doing some landslide forecasting. So this is so essentially we just use the ground displacement, which is the ground movement, as the observations. So normally, of course, when the landslide happens, it happens because the displacement is very high. But is that possible? You can see that beforehand. So is that possible artificial intelligence can do that? That is, because essentially through our mathematical and statistical knowledge and the training that we have, we know this phenomenon of a landslide is related to something called non-stationarity. Non-stationarity of the process, of the stochastic process. So if you are able to detect, because the non-stationarity actually occurs long before the actual failure of the ground. So that means that even before the landslide happens, if you are already able to detect that this underlying process is non-stationary, then you can use that information to do the right forecasting. So the key is how you are able to detect this non-stationarity in a timely and accurate manner. So that means here we are artificial intelligence is just artificial. It has to come from the human being. So eventually, artificial intelligence can do some routine job, okay? But we are still there to guide them, to tell them how to do the routine job beforehand. So
but would there be a case of the artificial intelligence? I guess the big advantage it has is being able to look at a lot of data and find patterns perhaps that you haven't seen. Right? That's one of its strengths.
That's one of the strengths. Yeah. For example, okay. So for the precipitation data, we have the data from the whole Australia and hourly data. So it's huge. And then the question is, if you just plot this data, it's impossible. Right? It's impossible to see anything interesting there. But with this kind of proof modeling and proof modeling we say that dimension reduction instead of looking at all the data, but we're looking at the representative part, which means it's become much smaller. Then from there you can use this model to identify some interesting information like seasonality or non-stationarity. So from there you turn everything into a visualization, like a plot, a map. Then people will be able to see. Without that part, people actually, it's difficult to see.
That sounds like an interesting future. I mean, you touched on this, Doug, in terms of we can generate data pretty easily these days. Is managing the data an issue? And I don't just mean having enough disk space to do it, but just in terms you just get huge amounts of numbers. Is that becoming a problem? That we're just getting too much data?
Well, I think that one of the really important factors is choosing your simulations and your experiments really wisely. As I said, it's very unlikely that the one experiment you do just randomly is going to be the one that reveals a new mechanism. It has to be carefully set up, calibrated, just the right size, the cells prepared in the right way, and then you take a movie and hopefully the signature that you're interested in is there. So it is really important. And it's very easy to generate too much data, right? To actually fill a hard drive really quickly with things that are not really useful. So it is important to keep track of this. Even in the models themselves, they generate data. So we have some really interesting models. In fact, there are a few people in the room tonight in my research group simulating the movement of individual microorganisms. And if you take even a small blob of fluid, 1 millimeter cubed, right, you have a vast quantity of bacteria swimming in there. If you want to simulate the movement of all of them, you need a lot of hard drive space, even just for the mathematical model. And so one of the ways we get around this is by computing quantities as we go, but then discarding the data. So there's quantities that you can measure in the simulation, keep track of something, and then not actually record and save all of the information. So you do have to be clever, and I think that presents challenges, but also opportunities about extracting important features from these models as you go, without just blindly saving and keeping everything in a manner that you can still go back and find the results if you need them later.
Jan, do you have an issue with big data that you have to deal with?
Yes, I mean, so the results that I presented there, I guess are big data in a way, in that they're genetic information at each spatial location. So there's multiple dimensions to that data set. But just drawing on what Doug said, I think as you get science that generates more and more data, huge data sets, I think the mathematics and statistical tools have to develop alongside it. So, for example, in genetics, if you go back 10 years, the field of genetics was quite different. And the statistical tools that have had to be developed to deal with that level of data have kept pace. And so now there's a whole field called statistical genomics. So I think that's what we'll have to do as we use big data sets in other fields. We'll have to develop math and stats tools to keep pace with that data.
And can you tell us a bit about those genetic studies?
Yeah, so I mean, if you go back far enough, so genetic studies would have just been at a single location. They would have looked at a single place in the genome, whereas now they can do whole genome sequencing and give rise to huge data sets. And so the statistical methods that dealt with just an individual location were appropriate for that amount of data, whereas now we have to throw those tools away and then develop new statistical tools to deal with this data set.
And you've done a bit of work in this area, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. So the area related to Jim just mentioned is we call that genome-wide association study. So essentially, we want to find risk factors for cancer. So, say, for example, cancer or some disease. But now, what do we have? The data that we have the data on the whole genome of individual. So, in the example, the breast cancer that I was involved with faculty of medicine there. So the data that we have 4.4 million genetic markers on each individual's genome. But we know that it's only very few of these genetic markers are risk factors to the disease. The question is how you are going to find out them. So here the problem is not just the data is huge, it's big data, but also if you just use an exhaustive search method to find a subset of these 4.4 million genetic markers which are risk factors, it's impossible to do that. Even you have all the computers in the world given to you, run it for tens of years, you still cannot finish that. So this is where I think statistics and mathematics, computational mathematics algorithms will come into play.
Yeah, I mean, all the problems we're discussing at the moment, do we need more mathematicians in the world, do you think? I mean, there's fewer people studying it, right, these days?
We definitely need more.
Yeah.
And more diversity amongst those that choose maths.
Because what kind of areas is maths involved in the world, apart from the ones you've talked about?
I mean, I can't think of many aspects of life where it's not involved. Your finances, your healthcare, everything involves maths.
Yeah.
I think also it is involved in a range of different degrees as well. So if we think about maths as being useful to come up with an experimental configuration, or to analyze some data, or to just make a decision one way or the other. It's not that it always relies on heavy coding, numerical modelling and solving really complicated equations. It's just useful across a range of different applications. So the broad utility of mathematics, I think, as Jen said, that it's really involved in everything to varying degrees.
So a great place for getting a job, anyone out there who wants to study maths, right? And the robots are not going to take over too soon in the maths department, I gather. In your wildest dreams, and let's start up your end up there, what do you see as the future in your discipline? What can you imagine exciting things will be happening in 10, 20, 30 years' time?
Yeah, it's a really big question and something that we think about quite a lot. A lot of the work that we do is sort of focused at the scale of individual cells, interactions between pairs or three groups of cells, and kind of this ground-up simulation dynamics, if you will. So thinking about things from the simplest point of view. And we've made really big inroads into understanding of dynamics in the ocean, for example, in the base of the food web, with collaborators thinking about the dynamics of salmonella in the gut and how you can use antibodies to help prevent infection there. So you can make big breakthrough discoveries with simple systems with one or two different species. But of course, the ocean is much more complicated with many different cells. It also connects different scales. So I've shown the work that we're focusing on at the moment at the microscale through the microscope, but we know that these cells get carried around in ocean currents across vast distances. So one of the key challenges and really exciting opportunities, I think, is connecting increasing the complexity of some of these systems that we study, both experimentally and mathematically, but also connecting scales. And so going from microscale through to sort of meters, kilometers, and across the planet. And so this requires a range of different tools. You can't just simulate the whole thing. So we need tools, models that are connected at different scales, different types of experiments that actually talk to one another and pass information between them rather than trying to do everything at once. And I think that there's a really big opportunity to involve all sorts of really interesting collaborations here. So we work with ocean engineers who sail to Antarctica, people in microbiology to analyse chemical signatures of cells, all sorts of applications to actually think about the different mechanisms at play, and stitching it all together I think is really exciting.
Sounds exciting. Guoqi, what do you imagine in your wildest dreams will be possible in your field in 30 years' time?
I will see the growing capacity of statistics and mathematics for extracting insights from sea of data. Because now we have, it's cheaper, it's more economic, more and more economic to get heaps of data. But we know the data are not necessarily all useful information. There maybe a lot of noise there, maybe a lot of redundant information there. But with in the past and at the present, we are still not that capable of extracting insights from these heaps of data. But I see maybe in 10 years of time, we can do that. I don't know, but in 30 years of time, sure, we are still here. We are not out of the job.
We'll all be here. The mathematicians are going to save the world, I know about this talk. Jen, what do you imagine? What would you hope, I guess, might happen in 30 years or so?
In 30 years, I'm really hopeful that there'll be equal proportions of women and men studying maths at high school, university, professors across the whole level. That's just from a personal perspective, but like from a scientific perspective, I think echoing what Doug was saying, I'm really excited about multi-scale approaches. So looking at how, say, an infectious disease infects a single cell, how the parasites get into that cell, how that cell then replicates and infects that person, makes that person infectious, it then spreads to other people, then spreads from that population. So looking across multiple different scales, the mathematics of that is difficult and hasn't been solved yet.
Oh, wonderful. Hope it happens soon. Okay, look, thank you very much. Perhaps it's time to get some questions from everyone out there. So we've got some microphones roving around. So why don't we start here in the front, and then we'll go up to the back there. And if you could say who your question's directed at, if you have a person, otherwise just a general question.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm not disputing that advanced and pure and theoretical mathematics is not useful, but it is used by less than 0.01% of the population, like the speakers. It is useful to solve problems. But why make 99.9% of the people learn advanced mathematics, which they never use in life? For example, I was taught matrices, partial differential equations, and so on for many years, which I never used in life. And my experience is not unusual. If you take any professional, lawyers, engineers, architects, economists, and so on, they would have done mathematics in year 12, for example. And if you ask practicing professionals to sit those exams now, they would fail. That means...
Okay, so I guess that's kind of a general question, I guess, about do we all need to know mathematical skills? What do you get out of it if you never use them for a job?
Well, I'm not sure how long it's been since you've checked the high school syllabus, but they definitely do not do partial differential equations at high school level anymore. That's definitely at university. You need high school level maths to be able to, balance your credit card statements and to make good financial decisions and to be quantitatively aware every time you make any quantitative decisions. I would argue that advanced level maths at the high school level is very important. Of course, we don't want every student to come and study maths at University of Melbourne, because then we'll be out of a job very soon. But we're happy that students do love to study maths, and we want to make that available to them.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Okay, I think my opinion is we don't really need like 99% of the population to learn mathematics. But what we need readers of mathematics. We also need users of mathematics. Because we don't need to develop mathematics, but we should be able to read. So when some information is presented to the general population with numbers, generally numbers, but not questions, and we should be able to understand those numbers, understand the information behind those numbers. I think that should be a basic training. More than that, we should have users. Okay, so to the next level, we should be able to use mathematics in a way that, maybe with the apps on your mobile phone or computer, you can just plug in a few input, then you get some information that you understand what it is. I think that's possibly more what we need, rather than just going to do everybody like a mathematician.
So more maths literacy, you think?
Yeah, literacy.
Okay, we had a question over here. The microphone is coming on down. And then we'll get an online question after that.
Thank you. Oh, should I say? I was just wondering how much of your education to get to where you are today was like pure maths or applied maths versus how much was like specific to your domain, so whether it was healthcare or marine biology to get to your position.
Okay, who wants to go with that first? Doug, you're nodding your head.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a really interesting one, and it's in some ways easy to draw a thread and see, kind of curate the story of how you got to where you are when you see where you are presently. Right? You can join the dots and kind of see the trajectory, I guess. I've been interested in mathematics for quite a long time. My dad is here. He can probably tell you more about when I started counting and doing calculations, but I've always been interested in the world around me as well, and other things. And I think that mathematics is a tool for many people to actually make sense of other things and to calculate, to see how life behaves and how things move and roll and bounce, and physics explains other things too. So it's like kind of a language that's quite useful. Personally, my undergraduate degree was in mathematics and physics, but I did biology and chemistry. And second and third year, I was really set on just going down the math path. I thought that was it. But then I got interested in fluid mechanics in honours, which is a beautiful area where you use equations to solve how fluid moves. Really kind of elegant. Then for my PhD overseas, I actually started looking at biological fluid mechanics. So it kind of the biology started creeping back in. And it wasn't actually until halfway through my PhD where I started doing microscopy and actually learning the tools that I needed there. So I think it's important to keep an open mind in terms of jumping into new fields and opening doors there. And it's really, a matter of just a few years to go from looking through the microscope in the PhD to actually, running a lab and coordinating this. I will just say as well, though, that my mother was a marine scientist, and I have a photo, not shown here, of me actually as about a 6-year-old looking through the microscope. So I think that's probably informed something along the way as well.
So Jen, I mean, when you were 7, you were flying planes, right? So, but were you interested in maths from an early age?
Yeah, I definitely was. Maths was all I wanted to talk about or listen to throughout all of high school, all of university. It's all I studied. So I finished biology in year 10, and didn't study any more biology ever. And then now I'm in a field called mathematical biology, where I sort of have to learn deeply about a biological topic, and then I know nothing else about the rest of the biology.
Yeah.
And you can kind of make that work.
Yeah. And I guess you feel how most people think about mathematics.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, we have an online question. Do we have one?
Yes, we do. We've had a couple of online questions about quantum. If, when powerful quantum computers become available, how do you think this will impact your research?
Yes, we haven't discussed that. Who wants to talk about the impact of quantum computers on their research?
Okay, I can. The one that I have been doing is something called a Markov chain multi-counter, which I think at this stage they don't really treat that as a part of quantum computing. But in my personal point of view, it's actually quantum computing. Because essentially what it is essentially like if you have, if the number of choice is of combinatory explosion complexity, so usually it's of a power like 2 to power 100. It's a huge number. Then we want to find the best choice from all this many, which actually is impossible. But now with this quantum computing idea, actually I think it's very fascinating. That is, we are not going to find the best one. We are going to randomly choose. So essentially, the idea may be very simple. We turn that into a dice. So all these many possibilities, each associated with a probability. The best choice would be the one having the highest probability. So you are not able to search for the choice which has the highest probability. But if you are able to design a dice with this many faces, then you can just randomly roll this dice. You roll this dice many times, what would happen? The face that has the highest probability will turn up most frequently. Right? So this is a sampling idea. So essentially, how you are going to turn this sampling idea into feasible computing one, and that's just quantum computing. I mean, in our area, we call that Markov chain Monte Carlo. So actually, we have done something which is I think a few years ago. So we do this in the machine learning part called association rule mining. So we have here we have just 200 genetic markers. Any one of them could be associated with the disease, and we want to find the best one. So if you use the exhaustive choice, you would have 2 to power 100 possibilities, which cannot be done by exhaustive in a exhaustive way. So we define this Monte Carlo Markov chain. So then actually it takes very quickly, just like 1 hour or even a few minutes to find the best one.
So once we get the quantum computer, you've got the application ready to go.
Yes. Yep. Do have.
All right.
And also saying, sorry, just while we're on the topic of quantum mechanics, aside from the quantum computing side of things, we've been discussing biological applications, and of course, quantum mechanics comes in at the very small scales. There are groups at Melbourne University and elsewhere that are using quantum mechanics in biological systems to try and find measurements of things that are too small to see with a microscope. So the work that we do, we look through the microscope and we can see a bacterium, but we can't see individual molecules, and smaller than that, some processes which are really important for biological functioning. So that use is already there, and I think is set to grow as well.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Maybe we should have another online question. I feel I've got to keep this even in some way. Do we have another online question?
Yes, someone's asked, if someone studies maths to a high level, other than in academia, where can they end up working?
I know a lot of my colleagues ended up earning a lot of money working for financial institutions. But anyway, I'll let you answer the question.
That was going to be my answer. So if you study maths at an advanced level, you can go into academia, of course, but there's a lot of jobs working for a lot of very high-paying companies that look to manage risk. So they look to manage the risk of their financial decisions based on credit cards and home loans and health insurance. All of these things require advanced mathematics.
Any sector involving data will hire mathematicians and statisticians. A risk analysis, weather forecaster in a biological case. So this is actually in my case, because I'm a statistician, so my students, I have so far I have over about 50 master's students graduated, and they all found a job without any problem, even before they graduate. So I think there's a lot of job opportunities. So
good, a great message to get out there. Do we have another question in the room? Got one here. Microphone is on its way. We'll go here first.
Okay, thank you, sir. Probably my question is a bit related to the recent years. So the generative AI, large models, and the research and education in mathematics. So we've also seen the powerfulness of like GPT-4, and also the recent release GPT-4 can even interact with humans more naturally and can even do some part of mathematical reasoning and kind of teaching more education. And for myself, when I'm reading papers, I like to use GPT to do like quick summary for me, so I can get into the paper much easier. So will such generative AI and large models have some impactful or impact on mathematical research and education in recent years or the coming future?
So you're asking what the panel thinks about what the impact will be of those generative AI models. Okay, so ChatGPT-like models in mathematics, will they be able to do the students' exams for them, for example?
Only if they have access to them in the exam room, so probably not. I think those tools have a role to play, but I think, as was mentioned before, if you have garbage in, you'll get garbage out. So you still need someone to look at the black box and design the black box to actually make sense of good quality data to then make good quality interpretations.
So it's still artificial intelligence, which means it's not really human intelligence. So one example is actually last year I had a PhD student coming from Italy, and so we do this like landslide forecasting. So because the non-stationarity is an issue here, so I told him that this is very difficult. But the second day he said, "Guoqi, I have found a program. I know how to do that." So I was surprised. Where did you get that? And he asked me, "Have you heard of ChatGPT? I use ChatGPT to find that. Not only tell you the result, but also give you the program. Actually, the computer programs is provided to you." Then I had a look. No, it's not right. Something it looks so for a non-expert, they will possibly be fooled by this result. But with people who really know this area, it's not correct. Yes, it can help, but don't rely on it completely.
I think we use computers a lot already in our profession. We run numerical simulations, we plot things. Gone are the days when you use the slide rule to actually calculate numbers. Even calculators probably were frowned upon at some point as a way of sort of taking shortcuts. We don't draw things always by hand by tracing out little dots. You can readily put it on the computer and see what a function looks like. So I think data visualization and plotting things, we already have our capabilities enhanced, not replaced, but enhanced with the use of technology. And I think it's exciting if there are ways that can help to free up more time for us to think about interesting problems rather than doing plots onto a...
You were lucky you had calculators and slide rules. I had to use log tables. But anyway, let's move on to the next question. So we've had one in the room. We probably should go back to the altar now. Well, we'll go. Oh, that's right. We've got the second one in the room. Where was the second one in the room? Here? I've forgotten now. Okay. And then we'll come over. We'll get an online one and then come over there.
Thank you so much. It was so interesting. It's a comment and a question as well. The comment is, I think the mathematics is very important in the medical sciences, especially in the diagnostic area, where the CT, MRI is basically fully mathematical models. So do you think that the medical mathematicians are more important, or we need more medical mathematicians? But from the medical physics point of view, I think we do.
I think it's a really interesting question. I think mathematicians, as you pointed out, are useful across a whole range of professions, including medical imaging and sort of cancer treatment and other things. Obviously, the way that an MRI machine or an EEG or MEG, the magnetic fields, electrical fields from your brain, these are raw signals that need to be processed and interpreted. And so using physics and maths and really equations that are, in some cases, hundreds of years old, to actually make sense of these numbers and these signals is really, really important. But using maths in a medical context has other applications. If you think about cancer treatment, one of the things that we might imagine is that treating cancers with the highest dose possible is the best scenario. And there's some really interesting emerging research that shows that there can be kind of interesting interplay between different treatments of different magnitudes in a personalised manner. So I think that there can be some quite kind of counterintuitive results that you can see in mathematical models that don't always come about from trial and error experimentally. So I think there's a big future there.
Okay, we'll come to the question here shortly, but just we'll take an online one and then come to you after that.
Yes, we've had a few questions about how to get into these types of applied research. Someone's asked, I'm studying maths and love it, but I had no idea about this type of applied research. How do people get into it?
Jen?
So when you start your university degree and you're studying advanced maths, I think once you get past the foundational stages where you're learning sort of the maths that you have to learn to then do the more fun stuff, you'll eventually be offered subjects which should be interesting from a non-mathematical perspective, stuff like mathematical biology and applied statistics, which will open up the world of what you can then do later on with that mathematical and statistical knowledge.
And this often comes into the stage of you are doing a master's thesis. Say in Melbourne University situation, when they get into the first year of master's, then they are going to do a thesis. So in this time, your supervisor may introduce some real-world data to you. So you will be introduced to this area.
Yeah, and I'd say with me, I planned to do physics, major in physics at university, but then I discovered all the subjects I liked, like general relativity and special relativity and quantum physics, were all taught by mathematicians. So I quickly realised I didn't have to do the lab work, I could go into applied maths, and you kind of got a very different insight into the subjects that way. So I think it's, it's a matter of probably finding subjects that are of interest to you, right?
Yeah, I think even beyond the subject level, like Melbourne University is such a vast campus, and there's so much activity going on with a range of different fields. So you don't need to be enrolled in a subject necessarily to be inspired by other fields. There are a lot of seminars, discussions, public lectures, and other things that are going on that you can actually attend to learn about some of these concepts.
Yeah, and find your passion, right? Just sort of attend a lot of them and discover what you're interested in. Okay, now I've a question over here in the room, I think. Was it there? Yeah, okay, well I thought I had one over here before, but no, maybe they changed their mind or whatever. So at the back there with your black hair, I can see from here, glasses. That's you.
Hello.
Let's get a microphone down there.
Thank you. My question is for everyone. What do you do when you get frustrated doing math?
Experiments. It's great. If you're involved in a range of different things, you can always find that there are different ways to tackle a problem. And so you can spend some time in the lab, you can do some mathematical modelling, some computer work, even some emails from time to time, discussing with collaborators, travelling to conferences. I think our work is really exciting and really multifaceted, so lots of things to do other than writing equations.
I will go to sleep if I get frustrated. I will get my mind clear.
Yeah, I agree. Take a step away from it, see if you can regain some of your thought processes, and then come back to it later.
Okay, we'll go for an online question and then we'll come back to a room question.
Yes, question for Guoqi. How long has maths been used to forecast landslides? Is this new technology?
Yes, it's in a sense it's a new technology, because at the moment the landslide or earthquake, they also have some forecasting announcement. But usually if you pay attention, that will be only a few seconds, like 20 seconds or 30 seconds, you receive a message from your mobile phone. This is actually a very different technique, so what we are doing here. So the current one is making use, that is actually not forecasting, that is actually one earthquake or landslide has already happened. And you're trying to beat, because you are using electronic transmission, which is the light speed, which is faster than the meteorological wave speed. So you can beat them by like 30 seconds. But actually, if you are able to find out the underlying movement structure, ground movement dynamics, if you can see more in advance and better than human eyes or some other electronic tools. And you can actually forecast the forecasting much earlier. So we have an example here. Is actually we are right now. Okay, there are several works. One is we are doing this for some. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but another one. So the landslide. So in 2017 in China, in Xinmou, in the Sichuan province, there's a big landslide. It's almost over 200 people died from that landslide. And the question is, later on, okay, we look into that data set. So we got all the satellite remote sensing data. So over 3 years. So using the model that we are using, we're being able to forecast that landslide, I think, a few months in advance. So this is actually, the work actually get a lot of interest from I think our industry or the government sectors. So this is actually one of the things we are, so just early this year we were awarded, Australia DFAT Department awarded us Australia aid to studying the landslide and precipitation in Nepal. So we are using that technique to do that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how all that works out. Yeah. All right, we had so there's two questions. There's a girl with black hair and glasses here, and then I'll come online and then to you next.
So I'm a student going to attend university and learn math, and I want to know the advices from professors for us university students learning math. Like, do you have some good advice on how to learn math or what to develop or other stuff?
What's the secrets to learning maths? I'm sure a lot of people in this room would want to know.
I think you need to find the maths that you love, because there's lots of different areas of maths, just like there is in physics or biology, and you can't do them all throughout the whole undergraduate degree. So you'll have to decide which area you want to specialize in. So find that area as quick as you can, and then, as Doug was saying, go to seminar series, go to lectures about that topic, and talk to your lecturers and other students that are interested in that particular field of maths.
Any other tips?
And one tip I can say is, don't just focus on doing mathematical questions, because people may have a misconception that the more questions I do, I will be better. So before you do questions, actually read. Read is important. Read the textbook, the lecture notes, to make sense of the logic behind. Because mathematics is not just not about computing, not only about computing. It's about our logical influence. So a different way of logical thinking is actually very important. So once you get that part, I think that will be very helpful.
Okay, we'll have an online question if we have one.
Yes, a question for all panellists. What is your favourite project you've worked on in your career? How was maths involved, and how did it affect the community?
Oh, who'd like to go first? Will I pick someone?
Okay, I can say the most interesting subject I take in is actually called linear regression models, which is a statistical model. And why I'm interested in this? Because before that, I'm just doing like the typical people expectation of a mathematician doing. But in this subject, it's really going to study the relationship between one variable and a group of other variables. So simplistic example is, we know our weight is related to the height. So what is the exact relationship between weight and height? So if you use a traditional purely mathematical way, it's impossible to find the relationship, because the relationship between weight and height must be affected by many other factors, which even we don't know the information there. But using this model, I'm learning actually, we can just use a simple linear regression model, which is a straight line. But we just add that model with a random error. So that is just like a G box said, a famous statistician said, every statistical model is wrong, but some of them are useful. So from taking that subject, I find some of the models are useful. So that's my favorite subject.
Jen, what's your favourite research you've done?
It's pretty hard to choose. It's like choosing between your favourite children or something. They're all loved.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose one, so the one that I showed here, I'm looking at designing where we should go and survey next. So where should they go and spend lots of money that we don't have a lot of to look at where is their drug resistance to malaria. So it's an optimization problem that's quite constrained by budget and other constraints.
And you don't go on the ground at all there, you do any sort of ground research?
Not really, which I should probably go and visit a bit more often.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the projects that I've been really excited about in the past couple of years has been looking at the sharing of nutrients between microorganisms. So we might have heard of this process called symbiosis, where cells can grow faster together, or maybe grow when they couldn't individually. But this is typically thought of in a kind of uniform, kind of bulk, well-mixed environment. So some work that we've been doing in our group and with collaborators at UTS in Sydney and abroad is actually trying to resolve the collective dynamics of individual microorganisms and how they share nutrients. It's been long thought of for a while that really these bacteria are too small to find other bacteria. That'd be like finding needles in a haystack, and therefore impossible to actually share nutrients and help one another grow. But there's been a lot of kind of chemical signals, sequencing data, and other kind of circumstantial evidence to suggest that it could be possible. So it's a big finding we've made in the past couple of years, actually, is how these cells are really below the limit of what we thought detection was possible, and therefore kind of adding another layer of intricacy in the marine food web. And I think it's also particularly exciting because it involves such a big team of people doing imaging, people doing microbiology, sequencing, microfluidics, microscopy, and of course mathematical modelling. So bringing together a big interdisciplinary team is always really fun too.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here. Well, yeah, a quick question. Yeah. Just you need to get the microphone down here.
Thank you so much. I have found that there are various problems in mathematics that are still unsolved, and there are still $1 million of prizes if anyone can solve that problem. But I'm just wondering, if you want to think on those problems and try to find a solution, like do I really need to start by going to university, or how can I ask for help, or how can I start working on those problems?
So you want to solve these problems you can make a lot of money out of. Find a solution. Is that what you're saying? If you want some tips from these guys, yeah. I'll have them too while you.
I'm just curious, like how can I just start working? Do I really need to start going to university, or how can I get help whenever I need it?
So I suppose these are the Clay Institute problems that there's $1 million prize if you can solve.
Yeah, like Riemann hypothesis and things like that.
So no, like you don't have to study maths to do maths. There's been a few cases where people have done groundbreaking work without formal mathematical training. But it does give you a good foundation to then make those big leaps in thinking that I think would be required to solve one of those problems. There's a lot of competition because a lot of people are working on it.
There are so many smart people, I know that. But it's still curious.
Absolutely.
You never know. Okay, I had a question here. Yeah.
I'm impressed with the breadth of applications for mathematics. It's an exciting session. Some of the topics have been at the micro scale, some have been the landscape scale. I want to step up to the global scale and refer to the title of this session, How Mathematicians Are Helping the Planet. One of the things that impressed me are the work on planetary boundaries, on ecological footprint. Is there any work going on at the University of Melbourne in the mathematics area
about these global issues?
Okay, does someone like to answer that question?
Maybe, so we have done, I think, some of that. So for example, for this precipitation. So precipitation, at the moment we focus on just the Australia continent, but we could focus on the whole global scale. And not just, so actually forecasting precipitation is not by itself. Because the precipitation is not only affected by the previous precipitation, but also affected by many other climate drivers, like El Nino, La Nino, Southern Ocean Index, and also many other climate drivers, and also many human intervention, right, carbon emission and so on. So all of this has to, I mean, from a statistician point of view, we are going to try to build all of this into a model. So into a model class, then we try to use the data that we have. So in a sense, we hope we are able to contribute to this area. So we are not just, possibly we cannot provide a solution, but we can provide some insights, some information for government, for the general public to be aware of that. So that is what we do here.
Okay, well look, we're sadly at the end. If anyone has any further questions, we've got drinks and nibbles outside there, as Moira mentioned. So come along, have a chat. I hope you enjoyed the evening. I hope you learned something. And please give a round of applause for these guys.